It's a copycat league. We all know that. Teams copy each other all the time. And the Patriots are like the most non-replicable success story ever because everyone tried to be the Patriots and it didn't work. So now everyone's trying to be the 49ers and it is working for a lot of teams.
That's what I will say. Yes, copycat league, but they were trying to steal their identity. They was trying to take their social security number and beat them forever. They weren't just trying to copy them. Oh,
that's fair. Alrighty, welcome everybody back to another video here on the channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football, and I am currently doing a series here on this channel where I am talking about all 32 teams in depth leading up to the 2023 NFL season. And because I am a Chicago Bears fan, I cannot give like that personal in-depth insight into 31 out of the 32 teams. So to counteract that, I have brought on guests for every episode that actually are fans of those teams. And if it's not apparent, by the giant helmet to the or behind the gentleman below me, we're going to be talking about the Houston Texans today. And joining me today, we actually have one returning guest from last year's team preview, being Logan Farlow over to my right. And then down below me, we've got a newcomer by the name of BOEDiggity. So before we jump into this, how are you guys doing today?
Doing well.
Doing great. Doing great.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Now, I'm sure the feelings going into this season are a lot more optimistic and just happy compared to last season. And a big reason for that is because the Houston Texans fired someone who I obviously love in Lovie Smith and brought in a new head coach by the name of DeMeco Ryans. So just kind of as a whole to start us off here, how do you feel about the DeMeco Ryans hiring?
I feel great about it. He's a past player, so he has history with the Texans. So I love that. He's from the, Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, another plus in my opinion. And I feel like he's going to be great for us because we need a new fresh coach, a new fresh atmosphere to help this new regime get rolling. So I'm really excited. I'm so excited for DeMeco.
Yeah, just building off that, it's a positive energy. I think coming into the building, and frankly, it's like the first serious hire they've made in the past 3 years.
I agree.
No credit against David Culley and Lovie Smith. Those just weren't serious hires. Serious guys that were going to lead them out of this rebuild, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and Logan, you hit the nail on the head with the last couple hires. Like, it really felt like Houston was just kind of cycling through coaches to cycle through coaches. So, just to have somebody to blame, right? Because they didn't want to, the front office didn't want to take the blame. They didn't want to have to point fingers at some of the personnel. They wanted somebody to scapegoat every single season. And unfortunately, David Culley and Lovie Smith fell into that. Now, Lovie did do something at the end of his tenure, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, that may or may not have kind of pushed the needle for that firing. But like Bo said, talking about bringing in DeMeco, you've got a former player. The fans love him, as a player because he was a superstar with the Houston Texans. And now he's one of the best, brightest young defensive minds in football. He's coming over from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, which has produced so many fantastic coaches over the past couple years. He's bringing with him, like you guys said, a new energy, a new atmosphere. And, to put it bluntly, the energy and atmosphere in Houston, at least over the past decade, has just been horrible. Like, it has not been a good culture. The front office has been a mess. The team building has been questionable, to say the least. And obviously, we all remember the Bill O'Brien days and the DeAndre Hopkins trade and the Deshaun Watson debacle. Like, all of that stuff, thankfully, is now in the past. It's a bright new day. You've got a great head coach who has a great head on his shoulders. Is going to be great for a lot of the guys on the defensive side of the ball, including somebody that you guys spent a lot to go out and get, and we'll talk about him later. But I think it was the perfect hiring for Houston. On top of all that, he was probably like the best available coach this offseason, this coaching cycle. So I can't imagine the excitement that you guys have right now for a guy like him to come in after all of the bullshit that you have dealt with. But like I mentioned, Lovie Smith, who obviously I've already said I'm a Bears fan, I have a connection with. He was the head coach when I first got into football. He made a really interesting decision in the last game of the year where the Houston Texans were fighting for the number 1 overall pick and decided, you know what? Fuck that. We're going to win this football game. a meaningless division rival football game in the last week of the season. So kind of, a handful of months removed from that, and with a new quarterback, because that obviously would have been the direction you guys went with the number 1 overall pick. How do you feel about that whole situation in hindsight?
Well, with me personally, before the Bears traded that pick away to Carolina, I couldn't care less. I said, if we lose this game, cool. Number 1 pick. We win this game, number 2 pick. The Bears don't need a quarterback. We'll still get our quarterback. But obviously, once the trade happened, I was like, wow, it's a chance that the Carolina will take a quarterback, and they did. But I'm happy with CJ Stroud. So with everything in hindsight, I feel like it worked out perfectly. And also, it gave us a little bragging rights as a Texans fan. I mean, you beat the coach, you got to take it. Whether it means something or not, you just got to take your win.
Yeah, just kind of. I mean, I was happy with any of the 3 quarterbacks. Really, I thought each of them had their flaws and strengths. So ultimately, up to me, I was okay getting whatever was left. I figured the Bears were going to be trading that pick. I never really thought they were going to stay there. It just made too much sense for them to trade it. It was shocking, kind of just the way that it happened. Davis Mills completing like 2
a Hail Mary pass.
Yeah, right. Like the guy who hadn't been clutch it all season
has done nothing like that all season, and just right out the hat touchdown.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, it's almost like Davis Mills thought in that moment, fuck, if we lose this, they're replacing me no matter what. I got to give myself some sort of chance.
Just throw it up. Yep.
Exactly. And, credit to him. He executed very, very well on that drive, like you guys said. But personally, I think the whole situation worked out for everybody involved, I guess, except for Lovey. I don't know where he's at now, but obviously losing a job as a head coach in the NFL is never a great thing. But Chicago, like Logan said, was never going to make the 1st overall pick. And like Bo said, didn't need a quarterback. So they end up getting what they needed. The Texans, you guys get CJ Stroud, who I thought was the 2nd or 3rd best quarterback in the class. Kind of like Logan said, it was kind of pick your poison with the top 3 guys. Some had their issues in one place. Others had their issues in other places. So you still got your quarterback. You also got Will Anderson. So I can't imagine there's too much complaining going on at this point, but I'm sure there were a lot of Texans fans in the moment that were just livid. Like I remember the immediate reactions on Twitter from Bears fans was like, we just won the lottery. It was like a kid on Christmas, the excitement, because it's like, oh my God, we have the number 1 pick. And of course, back then it was like, we're taking Jalen Carter, we're taking Will Anderson. Yeah. And then, a couple months later, it turned into, okay, we need to trade this. That's the smart team building decision. But that whole situation was just hilarious. Like I have never been more excited watching Davis Mills throw a pass in my entire life than that Hail Mary. I remember my dad and I flipped it on right after whatever Bears game was on that day. I think we played the Vikings that day and got beat.
But y'all did it right. Y'all did the right thing that day.
Yeah, exactly.
Y'all bench Fields or something, right?
It was
something like that.
They didn't win that.
I think David Blau took a couple snaps in that game.
We're not giving him a chance.
Yeah.
So, we could have at least rolled out Kyle Allen for a half.
No, because I remember that day because I made a video and throughout the whole comments, the Bears fans, thank you. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, I mean, even though we're a few months removed from it, thank you. I appreciate it.
Because what did you get for that pick again for Carolina? Did y'all?
We got DJ Moore, the 10th pick, or the 9th pick actually, and then we traded down again. A 1st round pick next year, and then 2 2nd round picks.
Round of applause! Amazing trade.
Yeah.
Amazing trade.
Oh my God! You want to talk about excitement? Having a real wide receiver in Chicago for the first time in like 7 years.
Oh yeah.
Feels great. I say that because I hate Allen Robinson. I know that'll be the first reply, but fuck Allen Robinson. He was a bitch his last season. I don't consider him a real football player. But yeah, it was certainly an interesting end to a rather disappointing season for the Texans. Like I said, this is a team that went 3-13-1. That obviously landed them 4th in the AFC South, ended up with the 2nd overall pick. They were 0-7-1 at home, which is not a record I think I've ever seen. That's really tough. But 3-6 on the road, 2-3 in their last 5, which is hilarious given the fact that this was a team that probably should have been losing more football games. And then looking at some of the stats, specifically EPA per play and scoring numbers, those are things I've been looking at a lot in this series. They were 31st in rushing EPA per play, 31st in passing EPA per play, 24th in run defense EPA per play, 23rd in coverage EPA per play. And then in scoring, they were 30th in points scored with 289, 27th in points allowed with 420, and then 30th in point differential with negative 131. So out of those numbers, do any of them jump off the page, or does it just all kind of blend together?
I would say blend together, because it was mayhem last year. Like it was times where Davis Mills would have a nice, well, you would think he has a person down the field, but check down here, check down there. So those numbers really put in perspective. I don't want to say how bad, but just how, I guess, because we was a young team and had veterans on there with like a 1-year deals, but it wasn't a good team. That's all I would say. Those are not good team numbers. So hopefully this year be better.
I felt like two things I wanted to add. So you brought up the tie, obviously, and in that game, Lovie Smith made a decision to punt in overtime rather than trying to go for it. And that's a losing mentality. And then at the end of the year to really just go all out for it was just
a win. Exactly. So backwards.
It was so backwards. And then kind of going on to the question you were just asking, the rushing is a little surprising just considering Dameon Pierce. But the marriage between like the scheme and the coaching and the talent we did have just did not work. Like Derek Stingley playing in the flats all day.
Yep.
Is one of the worst.
Because that's Lovie Smith's defense, though. The old school Tampa 2, where it's just zone and sit out there, and it's not like how DeMeco is very hybrid. It's sometimes man, sometimes zone. So it gives things a little more variety to show his talent than how it was last year. Last year, you just say don't throw that way. Just don't throw his side.
Yeah, there was no willingness to like adapt, and I felt that on both offense and defense.
Yeah,
and then our number 2 running back was Rex Burkhead. It was Rex Burkhead. So there's not much you can do when your backup running back is Rex Burkhead.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Bo, I think you made a really good point, bringing up the fact that Tampa 2, that being Lovie's defense, that is a defense that is so predicated on having elite talent across the board. Yes. And you guys just didn't. Like, Lovie was running this defense like he still had Urlacher in the middle, Julius Peppers rushing the passer, Tillman lining up across from the other team's number 1 corner, and Mike Brown back there ready to pick the ball off. Like,
our linebackers were abysmal. Just horrible last year. Like, they couldn't make tackles. They couldn't fit in run gaps. It was bad. Oh, man, it was bad.
Yeah, it was really
it's bad when your safety, Jonathan Owens, is the lead in tackles. He's leading the league in tackles because your linebackers can't make a play. It's terrible.
Yeah. But on the bright side, and we'll get into a little bit of that when we talk about free agency, this linebacker core is going to be a lot better this year. They made some really nice moves, and obviously bringing in DeMeco, who is like the linebacker whisperer at this point. Yes. Yeah, he knows that position better than I think any human being that has ever lived knows that position. And I think that's going to be huge for you guys this year. But speaking of the defense, kind of looking at some of the numbers from last year, as Bo mentioned, this was a very Lovie Smith defense. So you look at the types of coverages they ran. They were 29th in cover 0 with 0.5% of their snaps being out of cover 0. They were 5th in cover 1 with 25.9% of their snaps. 1st in cover 2 with 25.7% of their snaps. I don't have the exact number, but that was number 1 in the league by a lot. Like it was, I want to say at least 3 or 4%. It was higher than, it's tough. They were tied for 25th in cover 3 with 28.5% of their snaps, which would probably explain why the run defense was so bad as well, because a lot of teams use cover 3 to fit the run nowadays. And obviously we'll see a lot more of that with DeMeco. He knows when to employ cover 3 at a reasonable amount at the very least. They were 21st in quarters with 10.8% of their snaps, 27th in quarter half with 3.9% of their snaps. Lovie's never been a quarters guy. And then tied for 31st in cover 5 with 0% of their snaps. They did not run cover 2 man a single time last year, which, as Logan mentioned early on, you'd expect that they would, because they spent the 3rd overall pick on Derek Stingley, whose entire game is, hey, I'm athletic and I'm tough. I'm just going to take away your number 1 guy.
Hip to hip.
Yeah.
That's my job.
Didn't Lovey say on draft night, like, are you ready to line up against the number one receiver? Or are you ready to take away the number one receiver?
His exact words.
And never implemented it. It's so crazy to me. Like, it was mind boggling. It's like he knew, Lovey knew that he not making it past this season, so he just say what he want to say. Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, and I mean, from the outside looking in, I respect some of Lovey's decisions, just kind of like trolling the Texans organization, because he knew, like you said, he knew he was not going to be a Houston Texan past this year.
Well, see, it goes back to the year when they were searching for a coach after Cully. They kept, jumping into the Josh McCown pool and said, we might take Josh McCown. And, well, we'll take this coach. And then everyone looking back like, you're going to take Josh McCown. You have Lovie Smith as a coordinator. Just make him the head coach. So I think that played a part into it as well.
Sure.
Whereas you're searching for a coach and you have a viable coach right there in your organization at the time.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. Like we said early on, it's really sad how often the Texans have scapegoated head coaches, and not only head coaches, but minority coaching candidates over the past couple of years, when obviously the NFL is trying to make strides towards promoting minority coaches and, really trying to balance out the league in that way. And the Texans have kind of abused that because, you get the Rooney rule with the extra picks and whatnot. It's kind of fucked up when you really sit down and think about it.
Yeah, but it goes back to also, I believe when the original owner, the dad, what's his name? Rob McNair, I believe. Bob McNair. He was more hands-on. So it was like when he was there, the organization was moving a little smoother. They had like some continuity, some strategy. But then when he passed away and Cal got into the position, it's more so Cal just gave the keys to Bill O'Brien and said, do what you want to do. I'm finna go in Maui and sit on my boat and relax, get on my jet. Whatever you want to do. You want to be the coach? Cool. You want to be the GM? Cool. And then it just domino effect from there. It just went downhill.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really messy. Like, to say the very least, it was a clusterfuck.
Yes.
And to kind of build off the Lovie Smith hire, I fully thought they were going to hire Josh McCown or Jonathan Gannon after letting go of David Culley. And if the Brian Flores situation didn't happen last year, I fully believe they would have hired one of those guys. I think they were so desperate to like make their image look better that's why they hired Lovie Smith, which isn't the right reason.
I agree. Yep.
I mean, it ultimately made them look even worse after this year.
Because they knew that the fans would have they would have outraged. It would have been a riot. It would have been a riot. And like they would have said, no, why? How are you going to hire Josh McCown?
Exactly.
Why would you do that? So,
but again, the overall theme here is it sucked. It was really messy, but it worked out in the end. Like I think DeMeco is going to be one of the best head coaches in football pretty quickly. But obviously, we were talking about the secondary, and then you look at the blitzing numbers, they don't matter. It's Lovie Smith. He doesn't blitz. They were in the bottom 3 in like every type of blitz percentage in the book. He just doesn't. He's like one of the most vanilla conservative defensive coordinators there is. Like, you listen to Brian Urlacher talk about that defense back when, it was in its prime, in the late 2000s, early 2010s. He'll straight up tell you they had 4 plays in their playbook. And it was just Lovey saying, hey, you're all better than everybody on the other side of the ball. Go fuck shit up. And it works when
football. Just go mess things up, like you said. Just go mess it up. Yep.
And, the classic bend, don't break defense and relying heavily on the other team making mistakes. That's all fine and dandy when you have like Hall of Fame talent on your defense.
You have those players.
Yeah. But when you're the Texans and you have a bunch of young guys and a bunch of like mercenary veterans on your team for a year, it's impossible to make work. It's just never going to work. Honestly, them being in the low 20s in EPA per play on defense shocked me for that reason. I really expected them to be a lot more in line with their offensive EPA per play numbers, where they were in the bottom 2 in both categories. But moving on, like getting to move away from that and going to DeMeco, who we've already talked about a little bit, is one of the smartest, most creative, most innovative defensive play callers and defensive minds in football. What are your expectations for this defense this year with a massive shift in mindset, mentality, and scheme?
Let me see. My prediction, hopefully we can move the the rankings for rushing, passing. Hopefully we can get like in the low, maybe middle teens. I would love to see that at the end of the year somewhere where the defense fits around 10 to 15 ranking. Because I feel like we had the players now. I feel like back last year we had a linebackers. This year we have Perryman. We have Christian Harrison of the on his belt. The kid from Alabama, Totoa, he's been playing lights out. And you go back to defensive line. We didn't have what's the new one we got? Not is it Rankins? Is Rankins the new player in the middle? Rankins. Yes, we have Rankins in the middle now. We didn't have it. We had Heinrich and Roy Lopez, who to me, Roy Lopez wasn't a defensive tackle in the first, but he was an end, in my opinion. He was a defensive end, not a 3 technique or 1 technique. So we have that. Then you go get Jimmy Ward, another mind for the backfield with Jalen Petrie teaching him. And you have Nelson and Stingley. I feel like there's just so many playmakers on this defense where it has to be better. It has to be better. It just cannot be worse. It cannot be in the low 20s, in the 30s. It cannot be there. They have to be in the top pack this year. I'm sorry. There's no excuses.
Yeah, I think you have to expect a pretty significant jump too. You mentioned how they were really low in blitzing last year, yet they were still a pretty successful pass rush, surprisingly. With like Jerry Hughes and Malik Collins.
I was gonna say Jerry Hughes cooked last year. He had, I want to say, 58 pressures and 9 sacks at like 34.
He still can play.
And Malik Collins is one of the more underrated interior defensive line rushers.
He's a great anchor.
I think he's gonna be even better this year with the kind of wide 9 scheme they want to play up front, let him have a lot of space underneath. But kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, like it's just a better marriage in between the defensive play caller and scheme and the players we have now. Like you look at what DeMeco did with Hufanga in San Francisco. I can see that easily for Jalen Petrie being all over the field.
Yes.
Talk about Stingley getting to play some man. And the secondary, I think, is pretty close to a top 10 unit.
It's one of the best. In my opinion, it's one of the best. It's got to be top 10.
Quietly one of the better secondaries in football,
I was surprised they got rid of King. I was surprised about that release, but I get it. The play against Tyreek Hill in the preseason, it didn't look good at all, so I understand. He can't play nickel like that anymore. But again, that's Tyreek Hill. But I think he still could have been viable as a backup. But to have Shaquille Griffin, Nelson, Stingley, they like the promise kid. I don't know if he's going to be that great in the nickel. We'll see. But I feel like they could have kept King in the nickel.
Yeah, it's a very deep secondary, and you got the safety unit of Ward and Petrie. Like, I think the pass rush is going to be a work in progress. There's some pieces. Obviously, you look at Collins, you look at Will Anderson, Grenard's going to be healthy hopefully this year. Rankins. I think it's kind of going to be inverse, rather where there's good coverage that makes the quarterback hold the ball longer, and that's where we get the pass rush.
Correct. Yep. More than a lot of coverage sacks, hopefully. A lot.
Yeah, and not only the coverage sacks, because absolutely that will happen. But this defense, with DeMeco Ryan's influence, is going to be so predicated on stunts and, just moving guys everywhere. I want to say, I can't remember if it was a team that played against the 49ers or the 49ers themselves that gave DeMeco's defense the simile of like playing against a hurricane because of all of the moving parts and all of the looping and twisting and all the different stuff that happens on the front. And you think about Will Anderson, who is one of the more athletic edge rushers in this class. He's the perfect player for that. Because not only is he like a perfect looper, but he can also like pin and allow guys to loop around him because he's got the play strength to do so. And you mentioned Malik Collins. He'll be able to get freaky on some of that. Jonathan Grenard, his anchor's nice. So he can kind of pin and let guys loop around him. Like, it's going to be really fun to see what this defensive line does, because I feel like it's going to be a lot scrappier because he doesn't have that luxury of, Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead and these like big proven names on the defensive line. Now it's like, okay, we've got the young superstar and Will Anderson. We've got a couple underrated guys like Collins and Jerry Hughes, but nobody's like a household name that people are looking at are like, okay, he's about to go off. It's going to be like, you're going to find out Jerry Hughes is in the top 10 in sacks, like for the first half of the season. It's going to be like, the casual fans are going to be like, what is he doing up there? and it's all going to be like, just really, really good football coached by DeMeco Ryans. And that's not even getting into the secondary, which Logan brought up, how deep that group is. And Bo, you said you don't know how Tavier Thomas is going to fare in the slot. I'm really, really confident in him there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like he's somebody that I got put onto last offseason by Nico Elite Takes, if you guys know him. He was tweeting about him and I was like, okay, let me go check him out. And I remember I hyped him up a little bit in the team preview last year when Logan and I were sitting down with a couple other people, and I was really expecting him to have a big year last year, and he didn't quite, but I think that was more of a schematic thing than anything because, obviously we talked about it was a very zone-heavy defense, and Tavier Thomas is more of a man corner. He's physical, he's aggressive, he's got really solid athleticism. He can, stick to a wide receiver and take them out of the play. Plus, he's a really solid run defender. So I think him in the nickel is going to be fantastic, especially if they're going to run more man coverage for Derek Stingley. Like, I know a lot of people are predicting a Derek Stingley breakout this year, which is totally valid. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I think he's going to be very, very good this year. But I think Tavier Thomas is someone that should be brought up just as much because of that. I think he's going to benefit just as much from playing more man coverage and playing in this new defense as Derek Stingley, to the point where I've kind of been teasing this in these team previews. I'm putting together like an all agenda team, kind of akin to an all pro team. And I think Tavier Thomas is going to be on it. Like, I am so excited for him this year. I think he's going to be a lot bigger part of this defense than maybe some people are giving him credit for. And then obviously the safety duo. When Jalen Peter is coming out, I saw a little bit of Jimmy Ward in his game. So I think him getting to learn from Jimmy Ward is going to be really nice, and him playing more in that Hufanga role, like you guys mentioned. So this defense, even though some of the personnel might not jump off the page at the casual fan, I think is going to be a top 15 unit at the very least. Like, that is probably their floor for me, is like middle of the pack.
I need that top 15. I need to see it.
And I think you're talking about DeMeco putting them in a bunch of different places. I think the roster kind of lends itself to that. I mean,
absolutely.
Petrie at Baylor was mostly like a box safety. And then last year they put him at free safety, and he kind of flourished, like
making plays all over the field.
Yeah, I have nightmares about Jalen Petrie.
Tavier Thomas you talk about, and then Christian Harris is one of the fastest linebackers in football, and I think that lends itself pretty well to what DeMeco wants to do, like an Azeez Al-Shaair type player.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Christian Harris might benefit more than the two corners from DeMeco Ryans, honestly, because he's somebody that, like Logan mentioned, coming out super athlete at linebacker, ran like a 4.4. And we've seen what DeMeco has done over the years with different linebackers. He played a hand in Fred Warner's development. He helped develop Dre Greenlaw. He helped develop Azeez Al-Shaair. Like Logan said, he is someone that I think is going to be in for a breakout year as well. Like, there's a lot of the main takeaway here is there's a lot of really fun young pieces on this defense that could really take off. And obviously, like Will Anderson, he goes without saying with the taking off this year. When we get to the draft, we'll talk a little bit more about him, because I actually have some thoughts that might go against the grain a little bit there. But DeMeco was the perfect hiring for this team. Like, that's the takeaway here. And the amount of young defensive pieces he's going to get to work with and develop and mold the way he wants to mold them is going to be huge for him. I'm super excited for you guys.
I agree. I can't wait.
On the other side of the ball, I will say I'm not quite as excited, but that's not like a slight to the offense. It's more of just that's how excited I am for the defense, right?
Yeah.
You guys bring in a new offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, I want to say is how you say his last name, coming over from the 49ers, obviously. Worked for Kyle Shanahan since 2017, has plenty of experience in the meta of the run game, if you will, in this wide zone offense that everybody seems to be running and adapting and utilizing. So just kind of before we jump into the specifics of last year, are you guys excited to see this team kind of shift away from a gap scheme and the more old school type of running that Lovey was trying to force down your throats and get into more of the modern kind of proven wide zone scheme that a lot of the NFL is running?
100%.
Definitely, because I believe it's based off the Shanahan offense as well, and I feel like that offense does not lose. I don't know what it is. It's so simple. It's just zone read, and the running back is getting 70 yards on the field. So I'm more excited. I'm very excited about that, especially having two running backs now.
Yeah.
Like the Texans' best years was under Gary Kubiak with Arian Foster running a similar type of offense. Now DeMeco's back. It feels very much like that. And I think you have to be excited, especially for like Dameon Pierce. He had a great rookie year running the gap scheme runs, but I think he's way better suited for this, one cut and go running
exactly.
style.
Yeah. Logan, you bringing up Dameon Pierce is a fantastic point, because you look at him last year and he really was like a one cut back. He's like a one cut back on steroids is kind of what I would akin Dameon Pierce to, because a lot of one cut backs, you look at them and it's like, Damian Harris, David Montgomery, guys that are good, but they're never going to be a superstar. Dameon Pierce can be a superstar in the NFL because he's a one cut back with a little more athleticism than you usually see and a little bit more power than you usually see. So him getting to run in this offense, and, if you run a lot of outside zone, your team's going to run a lot of counter and do a lot of like backdoor cuts, and Dameon Pierce is fantastic as that. So I love this fit. And it's funny you brought up Gary Kubiak, because I did have written down, this is going to be kind of like a throwback to Kubiak a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it'll be more efficient, and I think it'll be more, modern, obviously, because it's been a while, but it's got that Kubiak vibe to it. And I love that the Texans kind of just said, you know what? We tried some weird different things. Let's just throw it back to when the fans were happy. Bring back DeMeco, bring back a similar type of offense. And
we try to be the Patriots. Let's just.
Oh my God, man. Don't get me started on the trying to be Patriots years. Oh.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's funny, it's a copycat league. We all know that. Teams copy each other all the time. And the Patriots are like the most non-replicable success story ever, because everyone tried to be the Patriots and it didn't work. So now everyone's trying to be the 49ers, and it is working for a lot of teams.
That's what I will say. Yes, copycat league, but they were trying to steal their identity. They was trying to take their social security number and beat them forever. They weren't just trying to copy them. Oh,
that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. But looking at the actual run splits from last year, like we said, this is a gap power scheme. They were tied for 23rd in outside zone with 17%. That is going to skyrocket. They were tied for 9th in inside zone with 27% of their rushing plays. That I'm curious to see how they'll attack, because I thought Dameon Pierce was really nice when they would run inside zone, but obviously these more Shanahan offenses don't run it quite as much. So we'll have to see there. They were tied for 16th in duo with 17% of their plays. They were tied for 9th in power with 10%. They were tied for 10th in counter with 8%. Like I said, power and counter are kind of used as like, for lack of better words, a counter punch to outside zone. When you're going up against like a bear front, for example, or something that fits outside zone, well, you hit them with counter and it's curtains, right? And Dameon Pierce is going to be so good at that. Those counter runs are going to be so huge for the Texans this year. And then they were tied for 15th in draw with 2%. Makes sense. A lot of teams nowadays, if they're running draw, it's QB draw. And if you're running QB draw with Davis Mills, okay. Like, I don't even have words to describe the idea of that. Then they were tied for 9th in pin and pull with 10%. So very much, again, like we said, gap scheme, going to change to a zone scheme, going to be more exciting, fits the personnel a lot better, which Logan brought up initially and will continue to get brought up again and again and again as we talk about more of this team. That's the big thing, is just how great it is to see the personnel actually fit the scheme, or the scheme fit the personnel, however you want to put it. But before we move off of the running game, I do want to bring up one player that I'm a huge fan of, despite Troy Hairston. I got to talk about him.
I thought you were going to go Andrew Beck there.
No, Troy Hairston's my guy. Listen, Andrew Beck's great too. Don't get me wrong. I know he's the starter now, because I found out this morning that Troy Hairston is out for the season.
Out for the season.
I teared up a little bit. Like, that actually hurt me.
He's got a great story.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like, I'm such a sucker for a fullback with a chip on their shoulder, because that's what every fullback needs, is a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
And I will admit, I contributed to that chip last offseason. Like, I remember when he beat out, oh my God, why am I forgetting his name? Andy Janovich. When he beat out Andy Janovich in camp last year, I made a video like half joking, but also half not, being like, the Texans organization's a fucking joke. This is a terrible move. You're giving up one of the best fullbacks of the past decade for some UDFA. What are you doing here? And then it took me 5 weeks to be like, oh, okay, I see why they gave up on him. He's really
Not
good.
only
Yeah.
a UDFA, he was a linebacker in college.
Yes, and they
A
transferred him to
D2 linebacker.
Can't believe that.
Well, that actually happens a lot more than you'd think nowadays. Like Jason Kabinda for the Lions, he's top 10 all time at Penn State in tackles. Keith Smith from the Falcons, who was a big part of their offense, he was a linebacker. But either way, like it's a pretty common occurrence because, the NFL, it's no secret, fullbacks aren't what they used to be. And kids see that and they're like, okay, I've got the build to play fullback, but I'm probably better off to just commit as a linebacker because that's what's going to get me a better chance of getting to the league. And then they do that. And, maybe if they don't quite hit their ceiling as a linebacker, teams that are hard nosed, like the Texans were trying to be last year, will be like, okay, you know what? Fuck it, go play fullback again and let's see what happened. With Troy Hairston, it worked out beautifully. Like I became a Troy Hairston fan so quickly last year. Like I said, I think it took 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks for me. It was
really the Charger game for me for the long Damian Pierce run.
Oh my God!
You see him make that block. I was like, oh yeah, he's gonna fit him perfectly.
Oh my God, yeah. That block on the Chargers game, I made a full TikTok about that play in particular, where I set it up. I was like, everyone's talking about Damian Pierce. He's this great running back, blah, blah, blah. He wouldn't be shit if it wasn't for Troy Hairston, is essentially what I said in that video. And I might have been exaggerating a little bit, but I love Troy Hairston. And, I don't want to flex or anything, but he follows me on Twitter now because of all of the the propaganda I've pushed. And I remember he sent me a DM randomly one day and was like, hey man, thanks for the support. And I was like, you know what? This is what I do it for. This is why I'm here. This is why I have a platform. And I'm sure he does not remember that interaction whatsoever. But that was like the highlight of my career as a content creator.
No, that's so cool.
Far.
That's so cool. Like anytime you get acknowledgement, that is amazing. Like that just lets you know, like, okay, I'm doing right. I'm just gonna keep going, keep grinding. Because and I'm sure like players, they probably don't even know that. But just a DM like that, it's amazing for your confidence to keep going.
Yeah, I remember one time a video, I think also a TikTok that I had it was a while ago. It was Chris Gronkowski. All I did was send a thumbs up emoji in the comment section. It was like the best moment of mine.
I'm telling you, that's all I need. All I need. If I got a video on Instagram and I see they viewed it, like they can just view it on my story, and I'm like, they saw it. That's all I care. That's all I care about.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same way. Like I've had Kyle Long, who's my favorite player ever. I made a video and it was like some trend. It was like, I think it was called like football player theory or something. And it was based off some white girl trend, and NFL TikTok tried to take it over a little bit. And one of the things, it was like the player that made you, it was the player that made you stay in love with the sport or something. And I put Kyle Long and he commented like a heart emoji. And yeah, it's the whole point with that. It's beautiful that players actually do like interact with fans and stuff. And it's always like the best feeling in the world when that happens. I'm sure most people that are on social media have a story like that because it's so great. But yeah, Troy Hairston, I want to say it's a herniated disc in his back. It's some sort of back injury, which is fucking terrifying. I hope he's doing okay. Obviously he's not going to play this year. So Andrew Beck is the fullback for the Texans this year, which shout out to him. One of those guys that made the right career decision and switched from boring old tight end over to the real man's position like fullback. And he'll be good for this type of offense specifically because he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. He's a pretty solid blocker. He can move. He's athletic, all that good stuff. So he can play like a Juszczyk-esque role if needed.
Yeah, I think like his RAS score as a fullback is like a perfect 10. Pretty crazy.
That's beautiful. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no,
he's fantastic.
I'm pretty excited for him. Again, like kind of going back to the old Texans ways. He's not Vontae Leach, but you got a fullback still.
You got a fullback that can catch. So you can't hate that. Cannot hate that.
Yeah. And I mean, he had a couple nice plays for Denver last year. Like he had a couple like 20-yard plus receptions out of the backfield. So, I'm usually hesitant when teams just play a tight end in the backfield, and that's what Beck kind of felt like. But I think he's earned the mantle. I think he's a true blue fullback at this point in his career. And as much as I love Troy Hairston, I'll be rooting like hell for Beck. I'm sure he'll be playing better. Isn't he? What number is he wearing for you guys?
I want to say, let me see. I have it up here. 47.
Oh, beautiful.
47.
He's wearing a real fullback number.
Yeah, because at first I thought it was 83, but it's 47.
Right, because he wore 83 in Denver, and that was why I was kind of hesitant. Like I said, like when I see a guy in the backfield wearing number 80 anything, it's like, ugh. But 47, that's beautiful.
Like Vince Veronica for the Rams.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know it's not a fullback number though.
Yeah. 18 is strange to see.
That's how I kind of feel about Denzel Perryman wearing 6. I'm like, how you gonna be just mean with number 6 on your chest? Like, I'm not scared of running into number 6.
You see number 6, he's just a fat safety. That's what I'm thinking if I see number 6 in the box. Granted, Denzel Perryman will make you switch your mind on that real quick.
Yeah, no, he's him. He gonna make plays for you.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe he's trying to lure running backs into a false sense of security.
Wait a minute, that's Denzel Perryman. Exactly, I love it.
Yeah, as a side note, Denzel Perryman, I love to death. He's like Vontaze Perfect without being a total piece of shit, and I think that's beautiful. We were talking about the linebackers. He's going to be great for you guys this year. But jumping off of the run game, as much as I wish we could just sit here and talk about the run game for the next hour and a half, the passing game last year, I don't even want to read off these numbers because they were not good. We're just going to say they were bad and they will be better.
Yes.
And I think we can just leave it at that.
I will agree on that.
But talking about the passing offense this year, obviously you guys have a much more promising quarterback than Davis Mills and CJ Stroud, which, by the way, I have not forgotten the people out there that tried to tell me Davis Mills was better than Justin Fields and was going to be the second best quarterback out of that draft class. I do remember that. But what are your expectations and what are your thoughts on the offense going into this year, specifically the passing offense? But
my one thing I would say, I need to see Nico Collins stay healthy. I need him to be on the field for the whole season. Because last year, which I granted, no one really cared. So he, took a lot of games off. But this year, I need to see Nico take that next step to see if he's a true number 1. And if that can happen, then you open up the windows for Tank. You open the windows for John Mechie, Robert Woods. Like, everything flourishes if Nico Collins can be that number 1 receiver to make plays. So that's what I want to see.
Yeah. I remember sitting here last year talking about Davis Mills, and I thought he played well enough in his rookie year to earn a second year and at least get a chance. Yeah. He just frankly didn't improve. Like, the accuracy didn't get better, and the decision making, especially in close games, did not get better. So now we have CJ Stroud, and I think Stroud, out of all the rookie quarterbacks, is probably in the best fit right away scheme wise, because absolutely, he just needs to throw to a certain spot and throw it accurately. Like, that's what he does. He's his accuracy leads to yards after catch ability for his receivers. And that's what this offense has kind of been designed around. Talking about some of the receivers right there. I love Tank. I worked at U of H past 2 years, loved watching Tank. It's an interesting wide receiver room outside of Nico Collins. I love Xavier Hutchinson behind him.
Oh, yeah.
Whoever's going to be the other outside, which I believe is going to be Woods. It's an interesting mix on that other side there. Dalton Schultz is a fun little piece to have for the year. I thought that was a nice bargain find for them. I see it being it's obviously going to have its growing pains with a rookie quarterback, but I think it can be a pretty successful passing offense if everyone can stay healthy.
Yeah. And I need CJ Stroud to not do what Davis Mills did last year, because Davis Mills last year hiked the ball. He wouldn't go through no reads. He hiked the ball was out of his hand to Rex Burkhead or Dameon Pierce check down. I need CJ Stroud to read the field and make a play. Don't just of course, if it's a play where you get 2 yards, check it down. But if we need 7 to 8 yards, throw that ball down the field. Throw it past the first down yard line because we need to make plays that way. We can't just keep chunking it down here, screen here, swing pass here. Make plays down the field and then open up your whole offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like Logan mentioned, CJ Stroud is the perfect fit for this type of offense, right? He is like the ideal Shanahanian quarterback. You talk about a guy that had probably the best accuracy out of the entire class, especially downfield, which is going to be huge because the Shanahan offense, you're going to try a lot of posts and deep shots off of play action, off of bootlegs, and CJ Stroud can absolutely do that. Bo, you mentioned Nico Collins, wanting to see him stay healthy, and I'm with you there. Obviously, he needs to be on the field, but I think when he's on the field, at least right away, he is going to be the most productive receiver on this team, because you look at the way CJ Stroud was playing last year in Ohio State with Marvin Harrison Jr. And I'm not making a comparison between Nico and Marvin by any means, right? There's a clear gap there.
Just the size.
Right. The size and the way they play, because Nico Collins as like a true X can, get downfield and let CJ Stroud take a shot on 3rd and long and, hit him over the shoulder or, hit him like on a back shoulder throw or something like that. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this year when Nico Collins is actually on the field. Now, if he's not on the field, I guess Xavier Hutchinson just steps up into that. And I know there's certain people out there that are really high on him, certain people that are kind of, wishy-washy on him. I don't feel too strongly either way. I think he's fine. I think he's a good backup X. And if Nico goes down, I don't think it's like, hit the panic button, freak out. You have no idea what you're doing now. It's like Xavier can step up into that and at least be productive. Robert Woods is going to be a really good fit for this offense as well, because in his career, he's played his best in Sean McVay's offense, which passing wise is fairly similar to what the Shanahan offense brings. It's from the same tree, obviously. He's somebody that can really cook on crossing routes, off play action and things like that. And you're going to see him do a lot of that. John Mechie, I'm super excited for now that he is fully cancer free and is able to get out there on the field and make plays. I think he's going to be a super fun, like 3rd receiver, somebody that can really thrive as like a possession guy, maybe out of the slot. We'll have to see what the plan is there. Nico Collins is not Nico Collins, excuse me. Tank Dell is a fun piece. And then obviously Logan brought up Dalton Schultz, perfect security blanket, because as we all know, a tight end is a young quarterback's best friend, makes their job a hell of a lot easier. And then the other tight end on this team, Brevin Jordan, or one of the other tight ends, is really going to be able to, thrive in this type of offense as well when he's on the field, because the Shanahan offense obviously runs a decent bit of 12 personnel and relies on that second tight end to kind of be less of a blocker and more of somebody that just needs to get out in space and, get open off of play action. And Brevin Jordan has the athleticism to do that. So I think not only for CJ Stroud, but across the board with all the weapons, this is the perfect fit for pretty much everybody in the room.
It's like I said, when I told people about the offense last year, we had a lot of 3rd string receivers out there on the field with Davis Mills. Yeah, Chris Moore, Philip Dorsett, what was the other guy's name? It was Amari Rogers. It was a lot of 3rd string receivers, and they couldn't really get separation. So I guess that's why he checked down the ball a lot, because no one could get open.
Yeah, and Nico Collins is I'm really excited for him just to have a quarterback that can actually like put the ball downfield relative to his like where he's at. It's just accurately. I mean, even going back to his days at Michigan, he's never had like a good quarterback. I think like Cade McNamara was his QB at Michigan, and then obviously has Mills. I'm super excited for him, and not to like, I know you made the Marvin Harrison Jr. comparison. Bobby Slowick was with Shanahan in Atlanta when they had Julio Jones.
Yes.
And I saw a report that he's been making Nico watch a lot of Julio film from that year.
Nice. I need that.
I would like, I could see that. I mean, you could see the build a little bit. It's
absolutely
a similar build of sorts. And then kind of going through the rest of the guys, I think it has a chance to be a really versatile unit as well. We talked about running 12 personnel. I think even 22 personnel with Andrew Beck and Schultz and Jordan, and then keeping Nico on the field. Like that's a lot to ask for DBs to cover, like big guys, like big athletic guys like that. Then we have multiple slot guys like Woods and Mechie and Dell to really spread it out. So I think it has a chance to be a pretty versatile unit. There's going to be growing pains with any first-time play caller, rookie quarterback.
Sure.
Still trying to fill in some pieces along the interior line.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be nice to see progress this year, unlike last year where it was like kind of
it was stagnant. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man. But to piggyback off the Marvin Harrison Jr., my wish this year is because since we have the Browns' first round pick, first round pick, I need the Browns to be bad enough to where we can get Marvin Harrison Jr. next year.
Listen, I'm with you too.
To pair him with CJ Stroud, get them back in the connection together.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even praying on Cleveland's downfall for the sake of you guys. I just fucking cannot stand Deshaun Watson. I want him to fail in everything he does in life. So make everyone here happy and just have him suck.
Yes, be bad.
Mm-hmm. But Logan, you made a little bit of a mistake there. You brought up 22 personnel. So I got to talk about it now. I cannot let that slide as just a one-off mention. I love the way fullbacks can, really create mismatches in the passing game. And I think the best example of that we've seen in recent memory is the Miami Dolphins last year with Alec Ingold, where when you have a fullback on the field, defenses have to respect that. And they have to line up in a certain way. They have to set up certain packages. You have to bring more guys into the box. And if they don't bring more guys into the box, you have a numbers mismatch in the running game. So you can just, audible to an outside zone play. And you got, in this case, Andrew Beck taking on a safety downfield, and that's curtains for the safety, right? But in the passing game, fullbacks having that extra guy out of the backfield, especially off of play action where you have, especially Beck, I know I keep saying especially, but especially Beck, who has experience as an actual tight end. Mm-hmm. If you have him leaking out of the backfield on a wheel route or even just on a flat route off of play action, he's going to get open more times than not because he's going to have to deal with a linebacker. And like Logan mentioned, he had that essentially perfect RAS score when putting him at fullback. And his athleticism, you can't keep up with him if you're a linebacker. If you're a safety or a corner, you're too small to handle him if he goes up for a contested catch. And he can make contested catches. He's no slouch when it comes to 50-50 balls. So I think not only is it going to be fun to watch from the receiver standpoint and all that, but I think we're going to see an uptick in not Brevin Jordan, although Brevin Jordan will get more. Andrew Beck getting the ball this year. And I think we'll see more of him actually being used as a mismatch and being able to create numbers advantages in the run game as well as in the passing game and be a low-key weapon that defenses aren't going to, I don't want to say respect because obviously you have to respect everybody on the field. But when you have Nico Collins and John Mechie and Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz and, whoever else out there, he's not exactly the highest name on the totem pole there. When you're the defense, you're more worried about the guys out wide. And if you get it to Andrew Beck short or have him leak out on a wheel route, we've seen the 49ers do this for years with Kyle Juszczyk, and it has worked like a fucking wonder. I think Andrew Beck can be used in a very similar way, and I think it's going to be great.
He's got a good chance to score a good number of touchdowns this year, especially as we get close to the end, the end zone.
The red zone. Yep. He got a lot of
when they have to bring in more linebackers to stop the run game, like you were just saying, he's a mismatch in that area. I think he's got a decent chance to put up a decent touchdown total for, a fullback.
And he's a taller fullback too. So fullback dives will go especially crazy. Yeah. You have more length to kind of get through the pile there.
Yeah.
I'm about to look at my fantasy team real quick. Y'all got me thinking over here. I'll go back to the drawing board and see if I get him off the waiver wire or something.
I'm just saying, I am a firm advocate for fullbacks in fantasy football. I'm not a huge fantasy football guy. I play in a lot of leagues for fun. But I always have a fullback on the roster. I always make it a point. If you want fullback fantasy advice, I got you. Anything else, look elsewhere.
I'm in a 32-team fantasy league, so
so you got no choice but to get a fullback at least one.
I do have Andrew Beck on my
okay.
He might make an appearance.
Hey, listen, if you need a waiver wire pickup, look into Hunter Lipke. He's going to get a shit ton of goal line touches for the Cowboys. Beautiful. Yes. I love you. You are my favorite person.
Way too small. They got to hand off the ball to somebody on the goal line.
Exactly.
The whole thought process.
Oh my God. You see the vision. You know ball. You know what you're talking about. I love that. That's beautiful. When I did the Cowboys episode of this, I shit you not, we talked about Hunter Lipke for 25 consecutive minutes.
He's fun, man. 6'4", 240, North Dakota State kid.
Really? What?
When I first found out about Lipke, I remember I made a video or maybe I made a tweet and said this, but I did make a video. But one of the first things I said about him was he's Kyle Juszczyk in Mike Allstott's body.
Yeah.
And then eventually it hit me and it was like, oh, he's just better prime Andy Janovich is what he is. With like he's more like I guess as a whole, like Andy Janovich fits that mold. I'm getting into the fucking technicalities of fullback skill sets. I have gone too far. Either way, Hunter Lipke's going to be great. Andrew Beck, if you're in a 32-man league and you need someone extra in the backfield, go pick up Andrew Beck. But Logan, you brought up the offensive line, and that group is obviously definitely dealing or taking its lumps right now. Kenyon Green's on IR for the year. Scott Quessenberry's on IR for the year. Titus Howard's hurt right now. You just had to trade for Kendrick Green from the Steelers. Ironically, was taking fullback snaps all of the preseason for Pittsburgh. So
Juice
just kind of
got hurt.
Yeah, Juice Scruggs got hurt. I almost completely forgot about him. Yeah. So this offensive line right now in its current shape, are you guys like hit the panic button worried, or is it just like it is what it is?
I don't want to hit the panic button, but I was so confident in June. I was so confident. I said, oh, we're finna have Tunsil, Kenyon Green, Juice Scruggs, Shaq Mason, Titus Howard. And literally, like just one by one, they all just got injured or something happened. First it was Scott Quessenberry, then it was Titus Howard hand. Now it's Juice Scruggs. Then apparently Kenyon Green been hurt all offseason. No one said nothing about his shoulder. So it's been crazy. So I don't know now. I feel like with that unit, we never got to saw the whole unit together in preseason. So I don't know exactly how great they could have been, but I had potential for them. I had them being a decent line in order to keep CJ Stroud at least clean most of the games. But I don't know now. You have King. What's the Green from Pittsburgh? You have him at left guard now, and you have the rookie Patterson at center, which I don't know. I don't even know if he played center before, but he's at center. So and then against the Ravens, who's defensive minded and maybe throw blitzes your way, I just hope that CJ Stroud come out here healthy. Hopefully he can leave the game healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously confidence isn't as high, but I think it gives you some confidence as a fan knowing that Nick Caserio is trying to build a pretty stout offensive line. You know, he goes and makes an aggressive trade for Shaq Mason. He's been a high pick on Kenyon Green. He gives big money to Tunsil and Howard. Like he's committed to building an offensive line, which I think is a positive. Obviously, injuries are a part of this. I'm more so interested to see how this line kind of fits in this run scheme. These aren't like great horizontal movers, which I thought Kendrick Green was a pretty good trade for them. Michael Dieter, just kind of a depth piece. He'll probably get some run in there. But, you know, confidence is a little bit lower. But I think you see the potential when everybody is healthy that this is a upper half of the league offensive line. I mean, easily one of the better tackle duos in the league.
Oh, yeah. We definitely got good bookends. We have good bookends. So,
yeah. So I think it's a little bit easier in the NFL to build from outside in when you're looking at the offensive line. So I think we have two foundational pieces there, and we have them locked down for the next 3 years, which are probably going to be their prime years. And you got Shaq Mason, so we're one by one slowly building it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've got, like you said, Laramie Tunsil's probably the second best pass blocking offensive tackle in football, one of the better all-around offensive tackles in football. And Titus Howard's been, you know, someone who has really seen an uptick in play, and Shaq Mason's been consistently one of the better guards in football, like you said. My concern here, you know, obviously CJ Stroud is what you're worried about here. And not only am I worried about him staying clean and staying healthy, but my biggest like red flag was CJ Stroud. You know, like Logan mentioned early on, all these quarterbacks had their pros and their cons. And the biggest con for me with Stroud was his pocket presence and just how he feels against the blitz and his ability to kind of step up and manipulate the pocket. And I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of him having to do that this year, thankfully, because of him working off of play action and working off of bootlegs. But obviously you can't run a bootleg every single play. So plays where he does need to like step back and kind of be able to step up in the pocket and maybe has defenders crashing on him down the middle. I think that's going to be really tough for Stroud early on, and I'm interested to see how he's going to grow and how long it's going to take him to kind of adapt to that, if he adapts to it. Not saying he can't, but obviously there's some quarterbacks that just never kind of get that aspect of their game figured out. You look at a guy like Jared Goff, who's a respectable starter, but his pocket presence is also kind of non-existent. Which is why for Stroud, I hate doing like player to player comparisons or like, a player to player ceiling floor, but just for the sake of the argument, I see him landing somewhere between like a Jared Goff and then like a Dak Prescott with his skill set. Yeah. So I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that, but I'm definitely concerned for Stroud this year because of that.
I think I'm sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah. The Jared Goff thing just reminded me, like, I've said before that I thought Stroud was similar to Jared Goff, and people kind of look at that as like a diss because, obviously Goff was traded for Stafford. But Jared Goff has led his team to a Super Bowl. He's led a couple of top 10 offenses in the NFL. Like, it's not a diss. He's not a bad NFL player.
He's a respectable starter.
Yeah. Like, he's more than serviceable and can lead a competent offense. Now, is he ever gonna be the one to go blow for blow with Mahomes again? Like, is that Monday night game ever gonna happen again? Probably not. But I think that's a pretty solid comparison, to be honest. But his floor is high. Like, Stroud's floor is high. That's one thing he just has to improve on. And I think we saw flashes of it in that Georgia game, which made it so like eye popping. That one back. Whatever you want to go ahead and say, Bo.
Yep. Well, I was going to say, this is when you need your offensive coordinator, Slowick, to understand that you have two new pieces in your offensive line. Get the ball out of his hands fast. Make some plays to where it's going to help CJ Stroud maybe have only one or two reads instead of having to read every receiver, and get the ball out of his hands fast. And that will keep him from, I guess, losing confidence if he is getting sacked more because there's not a solid foundation in front of him. So just try to help him out that way.
I think that's where someone like Tank Dell comes into play. Having a guy that you can just give him the football and he's going to make at least one guy miss every time. That's a piece the Texans have really not had in a long time. I mean, even
a nice gadget guy. We haven't had that in a while.
Yeah, I know. Like David, I don't know if you will remember, Kiki QT was kind of like,
we tried to make him that, but
that guy.
He just never panned it out.
Yeah, that never worked out. I think Tank Dell is more than just a gadget guy too. I mean, he was a red zone killer at U of H. I think he had like 20-something red zone touchdowns his past 2 years at U of H. Like, he's more than serviceable. But I think he has that ability. Like, hey, let's throw him a screen pass and let's take our 7-8 yards here.
Because I'm trying to see who are they going to have, like when it was back in 49ers when they had Deebo Samuel run them, I don't want to say wildcat type plays, but just the direct snaps to him. I want to know who they would have doing that. Maybe, I guess, Robert Woods, who they would have him do more of those
Andrew Beck.
Yeah.
Andrew Beck, maybe Andrew Beck. But just something to give CJ Stroud a little, help, so where the defense is focused on him.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've seen, the Shanahan offenses get creative with like the screen game. To go back to Mike McDaniel, just because, my fullback bias always brings me into it. Something he did a few times last year that I thought was incredible, and I'm sure Shanahan's done it before. It was just recent with McDaniel, and he did like this version of it on steroids, is he would line up Alec Ingold out wide. And next in like a little bunch formation, it would be Ingold, another big receiver, I can't remember who it would have been off the top of my head, and then Tyreek Hill. And they would throw a screen to Tyreek, and then you've just got this other big body receiver and Alec Ingold as lead blockers up the sideline for Tyreek. And then they'd be able to do different things out of that. Like the first game of the season, they lined up in that formation and then ran Ingold on a fucking fade down the sideline, and they had Tua throw a whole shot to Alec Ingold in the first game of the season. Which, if that's not big dick energy, I don't know what is. But I'm just saying, you can do something like that with Andrew Beck, and put him and Robert Woods, because Robert Woods is a pretty solid blocker out there, with Tank Dell behind them, and have them kind of be like the bodyguards for him. I think that would be sick to see. I don't know if they'll actually pull something like that out, but there's definitely ways to get guys like that manufactured touches and take a lot of the pressure off of Stroud in this type of offense. So I'm sure they'll figure it out, and I'm sure it won't be like, I'm not saying it's going to be like the detriment to Stroud that this year his offensive line's a little banged up and he struggles with pressure, but I do think it's going to kind of hinder his development in that way, like of being able to handle pressure and being able to move in the pocket, because he's not going to have a pocket he trusts, at least early on with all the injuries you guys have. So I'm sure they'll be able to work around it and at least keep Stroud clean. But I am worried about it, the long-term effects of running an offense like that.
I need CJ Stroud to, if it's not there, run. If it's not there, find you a gap and run through it. If it's 2 yards, 3 yards, fine. Just pick it up. Just don't stay there and get sacked or throw an interception.
Right.
Because Davis Mills did that all last year. He would just stay in the pocket and he'll have a nice gap to run, get some yards, but he never did it till like the end of the season. I was like, where was this at?
Right. Yeah. And like I said, there's plenty of ways to get creative with Stroud, and running bootlegs makes it a lot easier on a mobile quarterback to kind of take off at the end of it if nothing's open. So they'll figure it out. I know this is an unpopular opinion now, but I think Stroud's a smart quarterback. I'm sure he'll be fine. I'm sure he'll be able to figure things out. But unless you guys have anything else you want to add, I think we can go ahead and move over to the offseason and kind of talk about what happened in terms of additions and subtractions for this team.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right. So obviously there were a lot of fun additions for this team, but first we got to talk about the guys that left the team. So out of the free agent losses for the Houston Texans, which one of these losses do you think is going to have the biggest impact going forward?
Can I count Brandon Cooks as a loss, even though even though it was a trade? I can count him. I hate to say it, but I think he's going to have a good year with the Cowboys. I feel like he's going to have a good year with them.
Yeah.
They needed a number 2 receiver pretty badly. I'll go on the defensive line. I thought I can never say the name.
Okoronkwo?
Oh yeah, yes. Yeah.
I mean, this is a team that we had to go trade up to get a real stud pass rusher, an edge defender. So just to let one walk out the door, for a relatively cheap price to Cleveland, kind of hurt. I would have liked to keep him around.
Yeah. Okoronkwo is one of the more underrated edge rushers in the league. He was really good for you guys last year. Has quietly been pretty good for you guys. And him going to Cleveland with Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith and everything else they got going on over there, like, good Lord, why did we let that happen? But I love Okoronkwo. I agree that he's a pretty sizable loss. And Brandon Cooks is Brandon Cooks. He's quietly one of the most productive and consistent receivers in all of football, despite being on a new team like every year. He is one hell of a football player.
Yes, he is.
But outside of those two, like the names don't really jump off the page here. I do want to ask, just because I've seen very little out of them so far, how do you guys feel about Rasheem Green? Because he's a Bear now, and I'm trying to gauge on whether or not I should get excited.
I'm trying to remember Rasheem Green. What position did he play? I'm not even being funny.
An edge rusher, a defensive lineman.
Rusher? Really? The name don't jump out to me.
A little bit. He was. I mean, if he's not like if he wasn't a sizable piece on the Texans defensive line, then I know the Bears pass rush is kind of in a similar predicament. Is he going to get significant snaps for y'all?
No, he's a rotational guy.
I think that's his career.
Right. Yeah.
Fielding, honestly. He's all right. Like,
the reason I bring that up is because he didn't really play a lot in the preseason. And if I'm being honest, I don't have it in me to go and sift through the Texans defensive line last year to go watch Rasheem Green film. I've seen a couple cut-ups on Twitter and whatnot, but like I wanted to know, because Bears fans hate him. Because he got a roster spot over a couple like preseason darlings off the edge. So they're, Bears fans are the most overreactionary fan base in all of football, which I'm probably very biased in saying that because I deal with them more than any other fan base. But I did want to ask, and Boe saying, I'm trying to remember who he is, really did not help my cause.
Because the funny thing is, like, the names that just stuck out to me last year was Roy Lopez, Grenard, Hines, Collins, and Hughes. Those are the only ones that really made plays. Uncle Ronco. I can't name his name. Okoronkwo. I don't miss his name.
Okoronkwo.
Yeah. Yeah, he made plays. Those are the only names that I from the defensive line that I constantly heard made plays. And that really wasn't a lot because, like I said, the run game was terrible.
Okay.
Run defense was terrible.
Yeah, and that's the other bad thing because a lot of the like Bears beat guys have been trying to hype him up. Is like, okay, the reason he got a roster spot is because he's a better run defender than the other guys. And when you look at the Texans' run defense,
it was terrible.
Yeah. But looking at some of the other free agents that the Texans lost, guys like OJ Howard, AJ Cann, Jonathan Owens, Philip Dorsett, Chris Moore. There's a bunch of other names here. I don't feel like naming off all of these nobodies. Like Kevin Pierre-Louis, I care about because I'm a Bears fan. He was there for like a year. Rex Burkhead, you got to bring him up because God love Rex Burkhead. But yeah, it's outside of Brandon Cooks and Okoronkwo, it was really not a detrimental offseason for Houston by any means.
That's
like
what I will say. I will say I wish you would have kept Owens instead of Murray. The safety Murray, I wish you would have let him walk or traded him away and kept Jonathan Owens. Because I feel like Owens made more of an impact than Murray does.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's fair. But either way, the overall vibe with the losses in free agency is, new regime, going to let guys go or trade away guys that don't really fit the vibe. It's just how it works. Roster turnover is part of the sport. But you guys did retain a few free agents, two of which we've already talked about, Laramie Tunsil and Tavier Thomas, two guys that, in my opinion, are pretty significant pieces of the Houston Texans roster, if I do say so myself. A couple other names here, Derek Rivers, Neville Hewitt, MJ Stewart, Eric Murray. They all made the final 53, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm excited for Derek Rivers because he was a guy who jumped off my screen last year, but he got injured, so he didn't play. But this year he's healthy, so hopefully he can make a lot of plays for the backup, being a backup.
Okay. That's valid. But since we kind of already talked about the two main re-signings there's nothing really more to say. So looking at the third-party additions in free agency, out of these names, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with who got brought in, who were you the most excited to watch suit up for the Texans this year?
I'm going to say Schultz. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say Schultz. I feel like he was very productive with the Cowboys his past years. And I don't want to say we haven't had a true tight end or a tight end really that can block and catch, but I feel like with his caliber, it's been a while since we had that player on our team that has a security blanket and that's going to block.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Going back to the Kubiak analogy, we got our little Owen Daniels.
Owen Daniels, man.
I think the boring answer is just like Jimmy Ward. It's a young defense that needs some veteran presence, and he's helping out a really young secondary, young talented secondary.
Yes.
And he also has the experience with DeMeco. I think Denzel Perryman is also a really exciting one. I mean, we already talked about the linebackers were terrible last year, and to have a guy who used to be a former Pro Bowler, understands run fits better than Christian Kirksey does.
Oh man,
it'll be an improvement from what we had. So those are two guys I'm pretty excited about on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, speaking of Christian Kirksey, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bo.
Oh no, I was just saying I love how like they brought in pieces for every level of the defense. Where you got Jimmy Ward's a veteran, there's a Perryman's a veteran, Rankin's a veteran, and you just help the young guys become better pros. So that's what I was going to say.
But I did want to ask Christian Kirksey, did he make the final 53? I forgot to check.
No,
for him.
He did not. He got cut.
Okay, good. I can say this then. Why the fuck does the NFL think Christian Kirksey's good? I don't understand why this man continues to get contracts.
Last year he was compared to what we had. He was good because
so he stood out in the worst linebacker core in football.
Correct, because we had what's his name, Kamu Grugier-Hill, and he just quit mid-season. He was like, "I can't do this no more. I'm sorry, I can't. Y'all can't make tackles. I'm about to leave. Just cut me, please." So at least he stayed.
Yeah, like if I'm not mistaken, Christian Kirksey has made more money in his career than Denzel Perryman, and I think that's fucking criminal. That is ridiculous. I don't understand why he continues to get jobs.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy.
Okay. Yeah. Well, now I feel bad. If he's a good guy, then I feel bad. I hope he continues to get jobs then.
He was in the running for was it the man of the year last year?
Walter Payton, man of the year.
Yeah, Walter Payton last. So he was
Oh.
in the run for that. So he's a
So
great
I'm
guy.
just an asshole then.
No,
Okay, cool. Great. I shit on like
he's a great guy, but a subpar football player. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just over here shitting on the world's most likable Texan. Apparently, fuck me, I guess. But no, some of the other guys that the Texans brought in, obviously Jimmy Ward has that familiarity with DeMeco Ryans, played in his defense last year. Another guy that's like that is Hassan Ridgeway, the defensive tackle. Andrew Beck, we talked about at length. Thankfully, I'm very glad we had that conversation. Devin Singletary's coming in, going to be one hell of an RB2. That's a great role for him. Shaq Mason, you guys traded for. Dalton Schultz, Sheldon Rankins, Robert Woods, Denzel Perryman, all guys that we've talked about. Just recently traded for Kendrick Green, and then a couple other lesser names, and I'm pretty sure all of these guys made the final 53. I tried to make sure, but I could have missed one. Case Keenum, Mike Boone, Noah Brown, Shaq Griffin, and Corey Littleton. Did they all make the final 53?
They waived Littleton, but they brought him back, so he's on 53 now.
I did see that. Yeah,
they brought him back. Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't do what I did last night when I was recording the Bucks and leave everybody, and half of them weren't on the team anymore. Fantastic. It's progress. But yeah, no, I thought as a whole free agency went pretty well for the Texans. Obviously, the biggest thing was just making sure Laramie Tunsil stayed in Houston, and they did that. Traded for a couple pieces that are going to help on the offensive line. Denzel Perryman's going to be huge. Got a couple of DeMeco's guys. I definitely don't think this is an offseason any Texans fan can complain about.
No.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. I remember I went to one of the open camps this year, and it was so packed. I was like, where have you people been? Where have all you fans been all these years? But yeah, everyone's excited. Everyone's excited.
And I think it's I don't think next free agency, I think, is the one to really keep an eye on. I mean, the Texans are, I think, projected to have over $100 million in cap.
Yes, get that dead money out of here.
Guys were 1 year, 2 year deal guys, front loaded contracts. Like, I think the Texans they're ready to open the bank next offseason.
But see, this my thing is right here, because Nick Bosa is not happy. Is it possible? Is it possible that you just really try to make some room and then give them money next year?
I want to make it known I've spoken to 4 AFC teams since that has happened, and all 4 AFC teams have said Nick Bosa's not happy. And we got the draft.
He's not happy. He's not happy, and we got the money next year. I'm just saying.
I mean, hey, yeah, quarterback's on a rookie deal for the next 4 years.
You got to go for it. You got to.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of ironic, at least from my perspective, talking about a young quarterback on a team with a lot of money and an edge rusher in the opposite conference wanting money, because yesterday was the 5-year anniversary of the Mack trade, which, God, I feel old finding out that it's been 5 years since Khalil Mack got traded. But yeah, no, I mean, crazier things have happened, and obviously you have the connection with DeMeco now. That didn't hit me instantly. I don't know why it didn't, even though that's all we've talked about is how great DeMeco is. Good God. Nick Bosa and Will Anderson on opposite sides of the defensive line.
I dream about that since I heard the news about him being unhappy. I've been dreaming about Nick Bosa in a Houston uniform. Oh my God. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a slight at Stroud, but if you can't get one of these super weapon quarterbacks, just make sure everyone you go against, his life is hell.
Correct.
Correct. Oh my God. Because the secondary
maybe we will see what we tried to see with JJ Watt and Clowney. That never happened. We never saw them two on the field really together making havoc. But hopefully, if we get Nick Bosa, Will Anderson, Nick Bosa, hello quarterback, welcome. We here.
God, that's a scary thought. It's a very scary thought. Thankfully, you guys are in the opposite conference, so I only have to worry about that maybe once every 4 years, if that happens. But speaking of Will Anderson and the draft, obviously the Texans made a lot of pretty big moves in this draft. So just before we kind of dive into it as a whole, what was your favorite draft pick from this year?
Mine was Juice Scruggs, honestly. Okay. It was, because I knew we needed a center, and I was like, when I saw his film for Penn State, I said, oh, I don't want to say older, but I think he was a senior. He drafted, and he stayed all his years in Penn State. So I said he got, experience. He could play guard and center. That's what we needed. We needed a center to come in and make and be able to protect, I guess be the quarterback for the offensive line, because we haven't had that in a while. We haven't had just a true center that we can depend on. It's always been a rotating door ever since, I want to say, Chris Miles, Ben Jones era, them times where we had a center who was there constantly being there. So I was excited for him, but once again, he got injured. So I guess we'll see next year what it'll be like.
Oh, is he out for the year?
He's out for the year. Yes.
Oh, that's tough.
Yes.
I didn't know it was a year-long thing. That's terrible.
For me, we already talked about him a little bit. I feel like Tank Dell's too easy of an answer. Everybody loves Tank Dell.
Everyone loves Tank.
Right.
He loves Tank.
But I'll go with another receiver. I really like Xavier Hutchinson. I mean,
okay,
to have a 7th-round pick that you feel comfortable stepping into the X role as if Nico Collins does go down, like that's a win.
That's big time. Yeah.
And he's flashed a lot in camp. I mean, he's Iowa State's all-time leading receiver, big body, strong 40 time, good hands. I mean, he's a really fun player, and I think he's going to be someone who's in the league for a decent chunk of years. And to get that out of a 7th-round pick is a win itself, and to get a guy who can contribute to the team early on is a really strong pick. And I think Caserio the last couple of years has done pretty well in the later rounds.
Oh yeah.
Damian Pierce is what, a 5th-round pick?
4th, I believe.
I want to say 4. Okay. I want to say the 4th.
Either
round.
way,
yeah.
Still
they went too far for the 5th. It was like a late 4th round pick.
Yeah, Nico Collins round, Pierce was he's done well with the capital he's had in the late rounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Patriot thing, I guess.
Yeah. Another late round pick that you guys had that I really liked was Henry To'oTo'o. Not only because best linebacker name in the country by a country mile, but also like you've got the Alabama connection with DeMeco, and he's somebody that's going to plug in right away and just be one of the, more mature guys in the room. You saw at Alabama, he was the leader of that defense, obviously coming over with Will Anderson. He's super smart. Football IQ is through the roof. He is really good in coverage.
Harris, Christian Harris. So
true. I almost forgot about that. Yeah. So yeah, like he's somebody that doesn't jump out as like someone who's ever going to be an elite linebacker, but he's somebody that can absolutely be like a consistent presence in the locker room and be a leader on and off the field and, step up for you when you need somebody on 3rd down. Like, I'm not saying he's going to suck. He'll be a solid linebacker for a long time, probably, but he's never going to be Fred Warner or anything. Although, who knows? He's working with DeMeco Ryans. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe DeMeco will make him into Fred Warner.
If they can be 50% of what Fred Warner is, I'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need him to be Fred Warner, but with DeMeco, fuck it. Maybe he will be. DeMeco I could find out at the end of it. Like, you could come from the future and say, hey, Henry To'oTo'o had 16 picks, 8 TFLs, and 10 sacks, and 1 defensive rookie of the year. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, DeMeco cooked. That's all that is. But I do want to talk a little bit more about Will Anderson Jr. just to kind of clear the air on my end, because I'm somebody that has been hypercritical of him throughout the whole draft process. And not to say I don't think he was like a top 5 player in the class, because he certainly was. Like, there is no denying that. If you're denying that, you're reaching, you're trying to push some crazy narrative, or you're just grossly misinformed, right? But I don't see Will Anderson as like a can't miss blue chip prospect. I had him as my 2nd highest graded edge rusher in the draft class. And the biggest reason for that was at least in his senior year, which I tend to put, or not senior year, whatever his last year was. I can't remember if he was a senior or not. I tend to put a lot more weight into that final year in college, unless something went terribly wrong, right? An injury, you're playing with some sort of lingering like knee thing. The rest of your team was completely depleted and you were the only guy out there. So you were getting quadruple teamed every play. Like, if it was a situation like that, like Miles Murphy, I was really harsh on at first. And then I kind of took my foot off the gas, because I was like, oh wait, it's a new defense, new scheme, new everything. But with Will Anderson, he really struggled to finish plays in his final season. Like, he would do this superhuman shit to get into the backfield, but then he'd take a bad angle at the quarterback, or he'd fall off a running back. And that is something that scares me at least more than most people I've noticed, because I put a lot of stock in defenders being able to tackle, because that's like the primary goal there is to stop the other team from moving. Yeah. And like corners are the exception there, obviously. If a corner can lock somebody down, I don't give a fuck. But a defensive end, an edge rusher that needs to be a good run defender and be able to set the edge, that worries me a decent bit. And I don't know if you guys noticed that when you've watched him or have any thoughts on that, but I wanted to bring that up because if I just sat here and ignored that, I feel like it'd be pretty dishonest.
Well, I will say I feel like most of his snaps were standing up at Alabama, and they have him with his hand in the dirt in Texans. So hopefully, I guess that'll give him a little more grounding instead of just coming free. He can, I guess, be, how can I put this? Not be more sound instead of just coming off the edge free. Without anybody there.
I get what you mean.
More control by having his hand in the dirt. So hopefully, that'll help him get better at completing and finishing plays. That's all I would say on that part.
I think in some ways he's similar to Stroud. Like, he's an incredibly safe prospect because he's got a terrific get off, and I think that's going to go extremely well in this wide 9 front that they're trying to implement. Like, there's not a lot of tackles that are be able to kick step and match up with Will Anderson around the edge.
Certainly,
I think he's going to get 4 or 5 sacks alone just by beating the tackle to the spot there. Yeah, I thought he was a pretty safe prospect, and there might not be that J.J. Watt type of ceiling. But, I mean, very few guys reach that. But I think he can be similar to what, like, Aiden Hutchinson is kind of being in Detroit or what they're doing over there. Like, he can be a regular 10-sack guy, 8 to 10-sack guy a year and be a productive run defender. I think really what happened in the draft process was that Caserio and DeMeco just fell in love with like the player and the person. The big word that DeMeco's been using is like swarm. Like, they want somebody to swarm and create havoc, and that's Will Anderson. You saw against the Dolphins, like he just blows up that running back, and then he blows up the running back into the quarterback fumble. Like, there's going to be plays like that, just based off his athleticism alone. So I think they really just fell in love with the person and the player, and I think he's a safe bet. I don't know if he'll ever reach that superstar status, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm not trying to like take away from Will Anderson being an awesome football player, because he is. Even if my issue with him not being able to finish plays never gets solved, he's still going to make quarterbacks shake in their boots just from how quickly he's going to get into the backfield. And if he doesn't bring him down, you have other guys to clean up, right? So it's not like the end of the world. It's just, I'd like to see him improve on that. And then also I would like to see his run defense improve a little bit. Like, there were plays where he would just get completely washed away against the run. And some of that I don't necessarily blame him for. I think a lot of the scheme lent itself to him, not being in favorable positions against the run at times. So I can't say that's a big concern with him. I'll put it this way, though. Houston was the perfect landing spot for him. I think I said that early on. Like, him with DeMeco is perfect. And, like Logan said, it makes a ton of sense for them to kind of fall in love with him, not only as a prospect, but as a player and as a person. I've heard tremendous things about his character and things like that. So the main point here is there's people out there that watch me and know I've been hypercritical of Will Anderson. I want to make it known I don't hate him. I don't think he's going to be a bust. I don't think anything like that. He's a top 5 player in this draft class. It's just, I'm a little cooler on him than most people seem to be. I don't think he is, kind of like Logan said, the next J.J. Watt for Houston. But I do think he can be a really damn good football player and be pretty consistent for a while.
Yeah. So do y'all think that it's a possibility that he could maybe be like a Micah Parsons type or a TJ Watt type, where he can at least just wreak havoc and see what happens? Do y'all think he'll ever reach that kind of, at least, I don't want to say star potential, but notoriety to where
I think he can. Yeah, he has all the physical tools to do so. And that's the big thing. Like, tackling discipline, I'm old school, but I'm not ignorant. I know that things like that can be taught once you get to the NFL. I've spoken to a lot of, older people about this kind of stuff. Like, my dad's a great example of it. I talk to my dad about football constantly. And he's very much like, when you get to the NFL, especially for like defensive players, you kind of are what you're going to be. And it's kind of hard to teach some of the more basic stuff. And we know that's just not the case. We've seen quarterbacks relearn how to throw the football. We've seen linebackers learn how to tackle again. We've seen cornerbacks who are just these crazy athletes, but have no idea how to read a quarterback, learn how to do that. So the tackling thing with Anderson too, like he can fix that. And if anyone's going to fix it, it's DeMeco. He's just got to be like, hey, listen, bud, your angles need to be sharper. Your eyes need to be further in the backfield and not just staring at the guy in front of you, figuring out how you're going to get past him. You got to wrap up better. You got to come in with more control, like Boe was saying. Like that issue, the more I think about it, the more I think it's fixable, and I think it'll be okay. But I don't know. Maybe I'm nitpicking. Maybe that's the whole the moral of the story here. Maybe I'm just nitpicking because I want to be different. But
Oh no, not
I
at
don't
all.
think that's the
Because
case.
he'll learn. Like you say, he'll learn, and it's not like college Alabama where you just the big, like you're just the most physical person on the field, and you're finna take down this
Right.
running back from Kent State or something. This is the NFL,
Right.
so you need to make sure you on your P's and Q's and
Mhm.
wrap up and take them to the ground, because you're not gonna just
Mhm.
take them down just by pushing them. You got to actually go in with purpose and take them to the ground.
Yep, absolutely. But moving on from Will Anderson, talking about a different edge rusher. Obviously, you drafted another one in the 4th round in Dylan Horton, someone who I also think has a little bit of room to develop. Obviously, as a 4th round pick, that's going to be the nature of it. But he's another dude that's just like super athletic and needs to kind of be controlled. You need to take all the excitement, all the explosiveness, and kind of hone it, figure out how to use it to your advantage. And again, if anyone's going to teach him how to do that, it's going to be DeMeco, because it's a lot of like eye discipline stuff and, being able to pick up on cues and kind of fill your gaps and things like that. So I'm sure he'll be able to do that, and DeMeco will be able to figure that out with him. Jarrett Patterson, who Boe said is the starting center right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Do you guys have any specific thoughts on him? Because I'm going to be honest, I know relatively little.
I know nothing. I need to go back and rewatch those plays where he was actually in, but I have nothing. Like I said, I was so focused on Scruggs that was my
Sure.
main. I was tunnel vision on him. I was like, just watch Scruggs, watch him and
Sure.
see what happens. So I got to do my research on Patterson.
Okay.
I mean, Notre Dame guy. Notre Dame produces some fairly decent offensive linemen. So I mean,
Yeah.
if track record means anything to you, I think he's an all right player. I mean, I don't know much about the guy. He was kind of a depth lineman for me, for a team that needed some depth linemen. So
yeah,
it made sense to get him in the 6th round. But who knows? Area's been good drafting in that area.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's the thing, I don't like to scout the helmet instead of the player, but Notre Dame does have a legacy of pretty good offensive linemen, and he's somebody that played a couple different positions. So surely there's something there.
Yeah.
We've seen plug and play 6th round linemen work out before, so we'll have to wait and see. And then Brandon Hill, just kind of same thing as the 2 defensive ends, the 2 edge rushers, whatever you want to call them. Super athlete, just kind of needs to figure out the mental side of the game, and I'm sure DeMeco will have a fine job teaching him. Him and Jimmy Ward, I think they're gonna both play a pretty significant role in this guy's development. But unless you guys have any other thoughts on the draft, I think we're ready to move on to next season and kind of the expectations there.
Let's do it.
I'm ready.
All right. So moving over to the upcoming season, obviously, this is kind of like my last question for you guys, and it's a 2-parter. What do you think the Texans' record is going to be this year? And you can either give me a flat prediction or a ceiling and a floor. And then who are you most excited to watch play football this year for the Texans?
My floor is going to be 7-10. That's my floor.
Okay.
I feel like with this schedule, there's a lot of winnable games. I feel like we have one of the easiest schedules in the whole league. That's what I read, and I saw it was a graph of showing who has the hardest schedule, and we was in the easy part. And for my ceiling, I say 10-7. I say a nice 10-7. That would be my just being a fan and like we can win 10 games this year. That's my ceiling. 10-7. My floor is 7-10, and the player. Like I know everyone's gonna say CJ Stroud. They want to see CJ Stroud go crazy and everything. I would love for that to happen, but I'm really pushing toward the Will Anderson train because like DeMeco is a defensive minded head coach. I want to see if he's teaching Will all the great things. I want to see Will flash off the screen. That's what I want to see. I want to see Will Anderson make a lot of plays.
Okay.
I'm in a similar boat. I think 7's a good number. I think anywhere from 6 to 9 would kind of be like realistic. standard for me because there's a ton of winnable games. I mean, the AFC South and NFC South are pretty much the consensus 2 weakest divisions, and we play both of those divisions. So, the Colts are going to be whatever the Colts are this year. That's potential 2 wins there. That seems like the Texans always at least get 1 from the Jaguars. And then the Titans, who knows what they're going to be this year. So there's a lot of question marks in the AFC South, and then the NFC South. I mean, that one's just a cluster over there. That's 10 winnable games on the schedule right there, I think. And then we also play Broncos, I believe. Hold on, I got it right here. The Broncos, the Cardinals. Those are winnable games too. So, and they're also later in the year, which I think is another bonus because Stroud has a chance to develop. So I'm kind of glad that we get the harder opponents out earlier in the year, like the Ravens, the Steelers, the Jaguars in Jacksonville earlier. And then player I'm most excited to watch, I think it has to be Dameon Pierce. I think he's just such a perfect fit for this run game. And I think like 1,200 rushing yards, I don't think is off the table this year for Dameon Pierce. If he's able to stay healthy, he was never really used as a workhorse at Florida. They used him last year like that. And then him in the passing game could be something to watch. I know he was playing every single snap in preseason with the starters, which we all kind of expected Singletary to be the 3rd down back. But I'm really excited for Dameon Pierce. I think he's just such a perfect fit for this run game and offense.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, record-wise, I do lean a little more with Logan saying that like 6-9 is probably a pretty solid range for this team. If you told me in, the winter time that this is a team that won 10 games, I can't say I'd be shocked. It would just, Stroud would just pick up a little bit earlier than I think I'm expecting him to and things like that. Like we said early on, I think Logan said it specifically, there's going to be growing pains with this team. New head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, young quarterback, young defense, hard schedule to start the year. Like there's going to be growing pains off rip. But, I think once you get into the back end of the season, like Logan was saying, you're going to see a lot more success. You're going to see things start to click. And at the very least, this is a year where at the end of it, you just want to say, okay, progress was made, right? This doesn't have to be a playoff year. This doesn't have to be a contending year. You just want to see that this team took a step. Some of the young guys are developing. The rookies are, kind of at least partially what you thought they were, showing flashes of what they're supposed to be. And, I know that's a very conservative way to say this season might not be the greatest, but I don't think it needs to be. I really don't think it does. I think realistically, this team will probably win 7 or 8 games. If I had to pick, I would probably lean towards 8 games. And I don't know about you guys, but I think from my expectations for the Texans, that would be a pretty successful season, all things considered.
100%. Like if they can just, make sure that draft pick we traded to Arizona isn't in the top 5.
Right. Oh, yes.
That's a success to me. And if like you said, if the rookies and the team is playing well down the stretch, we head into free agency, $100 million in cap, like that's a very successful year. And I think you see the building blocks to taking that next step into contention.
Absolutely.
Because all the Cardinal fans telling me that thank you again. They like, thank you. It's going to be a top 2 pick. No, it's not going to be a top 2 pick. It's going to be somewhere in the middle teens. So get lucky. Yeah. Get ready to pick somebody in the middle teens with this Texans pick. You're not going to get no top 5 pick out of this.
That was always the wild thing to me. Like the way too early mock drafts were like,
they got us at 1 and 2. Yes.
I don't see this team finishing.
I said, how is that? Like, y'all think we're going 1 and 16? Yeah. I don't understand. It don't make sense to me.
Like comparing this team to last year's, it's light years different.
Agreed.
Yeah, when I did my Cardinals team preview, one of the fans on there was pretty adamant the Cardinals are going to have picks 1 and 2.
Ain't no way.
I don't see that.
I don't see that either personally.
I'm not even being biased. It's an underrated roster.
It's objectively a better football team than last year with an easier schedule, a competent head coach, with all due respect to Lovey, and a real quarterback. So it's hard. Like, I think worst case, even like doomsday scenarios, this is still like a 5-win football team.
Yes.
Like, I don't see them dropping below that. especially with having to play the Colts twice a year, because I don't have a lot of expectations for the Colts.
And I'll even go and
the
say with the
Titans.
AFC South, I got to be a non-biased fan. I got Jaguars, Texans, Titans, Colts. I don't feel like we're
I think
worse
that's
than the
probably
Colts
about
or the
where I'm
Titans.
at. Yeah.
Because it's a toss-up in that division.
Yeah.
I mean, we went 3-2-1 last year in the division.
Yes. And with that team,
Yeah,
it's not even the same as this team. This team is, like you said, light years away from what that last team was. That last team was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the player I'm most excited to watch, it's obviously like Andrew Beck, but I always have to give a non-fullback answer to avoid the bias. So I'd probably go with Tavier Thomas. Like I said, I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in the nickel. Either him or Nico Collins. I've got stock in both of them this year. And lump John Mechie in there too, just for the story of it. I'm really, really happy he's healthy. I'm really, really happy he overcame cancer. Like that's so awesome. Honestly, that if it weren't for what happened with DeMar Hamlin, that would be comeback player of the year material.
Comeback player of the year, yeah. I agree.
Like, I mean, it's DeMar Hamlin. The second he steps on the football field, it's his, obviously. In a different year, Mechie would probably have the same treatment. To be totally honest. But all that being said, I think that about wraps us up here. So before we go, if you guys would like to plug anything, by all means, the floor is yours, and I will make sure to include all your links down in the description below.
Oh, well, just follow me on all my socials. It's the same name as BOEDiggity 713 on Instagram, TikTok. So yeah.
Yep. I'm Farlow_Logan on Twitter, and then I run the Texans.WalterPicks TikTok account. So follow me over there.
All right. And like I said, those links will be down in the description below, as well as my links. You can check me out at Miller Football pretty much everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube here, obviously. Threads, if anyone uses that. I don't, but, fuck it. We'll plug it. And, if you're out there, you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like down below and tell us down in the comments what you think the Texans are going to do this season. Do you think we're too high on them, too low on them? You want to talk about a specific player maybe we skipped over, by all means, let us know down in the comments below. I'll be happy to chat with you. And make sure to subscribe as well. It's been a long summer trying to pump out all these videos. We're cutting it really close. The NFL season starts in less than a week, and I have more than 5 of these still to upload, so I got to figure out how the hell I'm going to manage that. But, it is what it is. If I'm a little behind, I'm a little behind. But we're going to have tons of fun content coming your way during the regular season. If you enjoyed the fullback conversation, there will be plenty of that here on this channel during the regular season. Weekly fullback videos. I swear to God, that's not satire. That is a legitimate thing that will be on this channel throughout the 2023 NFL season. So make sure to subscribe down below if that interests you at all. But all that being said, to everyone out there watching, as well as Logan and Bo here joining me today, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.